Construction, machinery, cars, up a massive 60% this 2025. Africa is buying more from China than ever before. Bilateral trade between China and Africa climbed to $222 billion in the first 8 months of the year, rising 15.4% from the same period in 2024. Welcome to the Africa Trade Show on Businessfront TV, where we unpack the money, the markets, and the movements powering Africa trade. I'm your host, Omolara Sanni. In the room today, we're unpacking Africa's trade with China. Omolara Sanni, co-founder and COO of Middleman, breaks it down for us. Middleman is like the intermediary between Africa and China in terms of imports, yeah?
Yes.
You guys do just imports. So I'm curious, why China? Why did you choose that particular, or choose to start in that particular market? I mean, you must have had your eyes on other market, but why China?
I think the major reason is really because of our own domain expertise, right? Okay. So my co-founder and I used to run e-commerce businesses. We did that for about 5 years, excuse me, before we started Middleman. So it's like, that's where we know, that's where we are familiar with. Okay. Throughout those years, we imported our products from China. So we really understand how that trade really happens, especially for the import side. Yeah. And also because of the volume, right? We wanted to build a big company. We wanted to build in a big market where even if you take a very small percentage of the share of the market, you're still going to eat good, right? So that's basically why we chose China.
Okay, and then how would you describe the Africa and China trade link? How would you describe that will I say ecosystem?
Yeah, so as much as we are currently focused on imports, and that's what maybe a lot of people even see, it's still a two-way street, right? As much as we import from China, we also have some things that Africa exports to China as well. But in terms of like the volume, the difference is massive. Like for imports, it's about 296 billion in 2024, and for export, that was about 50-something billion. So the difference is large, but that is also growing as well. So for us, we are simply focused on imports because that is where our expertise lies today. And typically, you would see people import different products. We are seeing different industries growing: construction, renewable energy, textile, fabrics, clothing, fashion, and all of that. But for SMEs that we currently serve, what you would typically see them import from China are gadgets, fashion accessories, home appliances, kitchen utensils, different stuff like that.
Yeah, so how would you now describe the market in general, Africa and China, as, let's say, partnership, that market? How would you describe that?
I think it's growing and it's getting better, right? We've seen our own government bring up policies that sort of facilitate that trade better. Very recently in the news, we saw that some Chinese manufacturers are now accepting Naira for payment. That's a good development, right? Then we are also seeing even the stablecoin route where you can now do the e-Naira, this ECNGN to their own stablecoin. So we are sort of seeing policies that shows that the future is bright for China-Africa trade. And also, we are also seeing that China is also focusing more on Africa because of the old tariff thing that they have with the US. They are focusing on other markets to substitute for whatever they are losing in that particular market. Yeah.
Okay, and so far this year, the trade or the imports, let me just say the trade market between Africa and China has been like growing.
Yeah.
So far, from the beginning of the year till now, we have gotten more, they've reached more, traded more than they had the whole of 2020.
Yeah.
Yes. So what do you think is key factors driving this particular growth? I mean, apart from the policies that you mentioned, what other key factors are actually driving this growth, this trade growth between Africa and China?
I think it's also the growing population in Africa, right? Africa has one of the largest growing population, and that also sort of increases demand for even consumer goods. The government also infrastructure development, and that is why we are seeing the growth in the construction industries, the machineries being important into the country. Yeah, but I think it's mostly the population growth. The demand is increasing. People need to consume some of these things, and also because China still remains the cheapest place to import some of these things from. As much as we are seeing other manufacturing hubs coming up like Vietnam, China still remain competitive when it comes to pricing. So that is where Africans look to whenever they want to import. Yeah.
Okay, so Africa, let's say Nigeria, for instance,
Yeah.
we have more, like you said, we import more than we export.
Yeah.
So how do you think that affects or that impacts our economy? And then in terms of local manufacturing, how does this affect all those sectors?
I think the biggest one that everybody knows would be the FX. We are not getting more dollars into the country. We are importing everything that most of what we are consuming, right? Yeah. And that sort of affects our own currency here. But I also see the imports having like an effect on exports in the sense that there's a lot to learn from China in the way that they've developed their own economy, in the way that they took their people out of poverty, in the way that they became a manufacturing hub. So if we are not, I think it's not just about importing the goods, it's also importing the knowledge as well. And I see that if we are able to do that, we can apply it to our own context and then use that to develop our own export as well. But a lot of it still also has to do with the government, right? There's infrastructure. As much as we keep encouraging the private sector or youth or individuals to sort of innovate, build things for themselves, there's really so much that we can do if the government is not helping, right? Everybody cannot decide to start using solar today because electricity is bad. There are fundamental things that need to be fixed before we are able to say we are doing export. Another example would be that in Aba markets today, we know that a lot of production happens in that place. But it will interest you to know that let's say a shoe produced in Aba, for example, 75% of the materials still come from China. And this is not something I made up. Like I literally walked up to somebody that runs an e-commerce website where you can buy products from Aba, and he showed me what he was wearing. The shoe was made in Aba, but 75% of it of the raw material still came from China. Yeah, so there's still a very long way to go, but I think we are making progress.
Oh, okay. So like that example you gave, I mean, Africa prides itself on the raw material exports that we have. So do you think, or how can we now get more potential in terms of exports? How can we now build the potential in terms of, so how can we increase that potential for exports, basically?
I think it's playing to our strength, right? And I think the biggest strength for us as a country today is agriculture, right? Mm-hmm. And it is also still shocking to know that we export some raw materials in terms of agricultural produce, and then we now import the finish. It doesn't really make sense, right? So again, it still goes back to the infrastructure. I feel like if there's infrastructure to actually process those raw materials, then why not? Why are we not doing it? And we are seeing businesses coming up doing that. We see Real Fruits. They've built a very massive production factory in Ogun State where they process their raw fruits. And so for them, they no longer have to say they want to export that and then import back. So agriculture for me still looks like the biggest potential for Nigeria today in terms of production instead of just exporting, because that's even the biggest export that we have today, especially between Africa and China. It's really agricultural product that we export to those to China, because they are also the biggest consumer of food. They have some massive population over there.
Yeah, and you talked about us having the raw materials, exporting to them, and then importing their manufactured goods. So do you think there's a way that we can actually now bridge that gap, or there's a way that we can develop ourselves to not be able, like, to just, do you get what I mean? Like, just take that off their backs or something?
I mean, it's still the government, to be honest. It's still the government, right? And if there's infrastructure, if there's support for businesses to set up factories here, then why not? People will do it. I know today, so there was a time we went to a building material market in Lagos just to talk to the guys there, introduce Middleman and all of that. And they were talking to us about how there are Chinese factories in Nigeria today manufacturing tiles. So a lot of businesses don't even bother going out of the country to import. So, but you know, those kind of businesses have the capital. They came in, they brought the money, right? And they're able to manufacture it here. Why are we not having Nigerians also setting up that level of manufacturing capacity? So it really boils down to access to capital, access to infrastructure, and all of those things.
Yeah. And all of that still boils down to the government. Then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some of the biggest industries or some of the biggest sectors for imports, export, trade between Africa and China?
So for imports where we currently operate in, we see construction, like I said earlier, really big, renewable energy as well. Yeah. China leads when it comes to the production of batteries, solar panels, all of the things that make up a solar system, right? And for Africa, we are the ones consuming it the most, almost about 40%. So we see a lot of that happening. I've worked before Middleman, I worked in a company that does renewable energy, also finance it for people. So I also really saw how big that industry is also getting. So yeah, we've seen a lot of that. Then also textile as well, fashion. A lot of the fashion companies that you see in Nigeria today, most of them import their fabrics from China. So we see that growing as well. And also technology. As much as there are some gadgets that are coming to Nigeria today that are tagged UK use, but some of them actually come from China, right? So we see those sectors growing.
Okay, and then for export?
Yeah, for exports, it's still agriculture, to be honest. That's the major export that we have. And then maybe for our fashion, not between China and Africa now, maybe our fashion industry is growing. A lot of fantastic fashion designers coming out of Africa and exporting their products. I saw a video recently from BBC where a particular fashion designer made over 1,500 prom dresses for children for teenagers in America. That's a really big thing, right? So we are seeing progress in that front as well.
Okay, and do you think there are some untapped potential in some other sectors that maybe they have not yet come out, that you can see potential in those sectors?
Not necessarily. I think, to be honest, I don't see an untapped. I can't really say there's anything untapped yet. But maybe it's still the agriculture in terms of exports, right? Maybe there's more that can be done in that area. Maybe there's more production that can be done and then exporting the finished goods and also selling it at a higher price. And also for Middleman, we are a one-way street today. In a couple of years, we intend to also become two-way street where we also open up African businesses to other markets as well that are trying to import from Africa.
Okay, so for SMEs, how can they now tap into this? So those that are still SMEs, MSMEs, how can they actually tap into this trade link between Africa and China? Maybe not just Africa and China, but like the global trade system.
Yeah, I think they've actually been left out a lot over the last couple of years. I mean, China has been Africa's largest trading partner for 15 years, but a lot of the guys that have access to that market, the manufacturers, the factories, the best prices, are really big corporates, wholesalers, not really SMEs. And that's sort of one of the reasons that we have evolved into what we currently are today. So earlier in the year, we went to different markets, Balogun, Alaba, trying to talk to these businesses as well. And a lot of the things that we got from them in terms of feedback is, oh, I have a brother in China who helps me. I don't need your platform. I cannot pass my 200 million through your mobile app and just trust that things are fine, right? I already have a brother who has been in China for several years. I just send the Naira to them. They find a way to convert it. They go into the factory for me to help me verify the goods, right? And that is what we are trying to democratize for these smaller businesses, right? a typical Sade who sells shoes and bags on Instagram probably doesn't have a brother in China. And what typically happens to these businesses is that they just buy blindly, right? They just buy hoping that what they actually saw on the website is what they are going to get. So now we are giving them access to thousands of these brothers who are already in China. They've been living there for several years. They are procurement agents, and they can help them go into the factories and do checks and ensure that what they are getting is exactly what they bought. And that is how we are giving SMEs access to that market. So now they are sure that the same way corporates can get quality product and ensure that they are getting the best prices and selling at the best prices here, they as a small business also have that level of access.
Okay, and beyond, okay, logistics now is one of the biggest factor that is still hindering them. But beyond logistics, what other barriers do you think is also hindering them from entering into that market or from tapping into that market?
Yeah, I already mentioned one of them, which is access to quality goods, right? There was a tweet recently on Twitter that blew up. There's this guy that he literally spent his last capital trying to import denims from China, and almost everything that was sent to him are not exactly what he ordered, and he was just ranting on Twitter. So for someone like that, that is a barrier for him. And now Middleman is making that better and ensuring that other businesses like him don't go through that. Payment is still also, as much as we have a lot of payment company, it's still a big problem, right? What you would typically see for small businesses today is they look for agents on WhatsApp or Telegram to try and fund their Alipay wallet for them to make payments. Some of them get scammed during that process. Some of them have to pay outrageous amounts in terms of transaction fees. So yeah, payment is still a big problem. Getting quality goods as well is also still a huge problem for SMEs. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to let's focus on you now.
Yeah.
You're a female founder, and that's so recently Intel Point released a report, and they saw that in Nigeria, for MSMEs, SMEs, their female-led businesses made much more revenue than male-led ones.
Yeah.
So I want to know why. I mean, coming from you with your experience and everything, why do you think that is? Why are female-led businesses, women-led businesses making more? Because in the tech space, it's not the same, basically. But when it comes to trade, it's a bit more. So why do you think that that's happening?
I think number one is women are resilient. I mean, yeah, that's that. But also that people actually underestimate small businesses, especially those led by women. We see it every day in jokes on Twitter. Maybe a woman that sells wig come out to say, oh, she bought this car, and they're like, oh, it's not the money from the business that got the car, when in reality people are actually making bank, and your report actually proves it, that these small businesses are actually making and I think it's just generally there are more women doing smaller businesses, and of course that is why those small businesses are making more money compared to their male counterparts. Yeah.
Okay. And what opportunities do you see in this trade sector now for women?
I think the opportunity is definitely to be able to tap more into the Chinese manufacturing sector, like that access to the direct factories, removing all the middlemen. Okay, not removing middleman, but you get removing the middlemen that actually make buying more expensive for them, and they are not able to sell at really good prices. So it's really, the opportunity is for them to be able to get better prices from China, and that extends to their own customers as well, better prices for their customers, more volume for them in terms of how they sell as well. So yeah.
And even with regional trade, so trade between Lagos and Delta.
Yeah.